Hi, everyone. Thank you guys so much for coming to this session, the empowerment model, how to make everyone part of the digital team. I'm Miranda Kerr. If I haven't had a chance to meet you yet, I'm the manager of digital learning at Shedd Aquarium in Chicago. And so if you haven't been to Shedd Aquarium or you're unfamiliar, our mission is to spark compassion, curiosity, and conservation for the aquatic animal world. I work in the learning division, which is made up of 3 different departments, but those programs range from managing volunteers, managing teens that come work for us in the summer and on the weekends, taking groups of high school students to go snorkel in the Bahamas, getting middle school kids to build underwater robots, having school field trips, do squid dissection, any number of different types of programming. And so across those 3 departments, we have learning programs, learning planning and evaluation, and guest engagement, so over 30 staff. But our digital learning team is just myself, and then our assistant director, who works with me, Heather. And so our goal has always been, though, that it can't just be the 2 of us trying to do everything digital across learning. We have to figure out how to bring all 30 plus of those staff onto the digital team so that we can get more done together. And so that's what we're going to talk about. So in general, our idea of the empowerment model has to do with sharing digital trends and new technology with everyone in the department, giving opportunities so that staff are trying that technology for themselves in a hands-on way so that they're comfortable with it, making everyone a part of our social media sharing so that all 30 of those people are trained and have the password and are sharing on our social, sparking innovation in our program planning so that every year we're thinking about how we can use technology to make it even better than the year before, and then using guided brainstorming so that we can figure out how to incorporate tech in the best way possible. So I'm going to go into detail in all of those different ideas. And then one other thing to point out, if you want to share anything on Twitter, my handle is MirandaRHK, and then for this session, it's the hashtag MCN 2017-T30. And so one of the things that I like to make sure that I do is to bring the fun in our digital trends. It's possible that you may have people who are hesitant to using technology or digital. At an organization like the Aquarium, we do a lot of environmental ed. So in a lot of classic environmental education, the thought of bringing an iPad or a phone or technology into that has sometimes some negative connotations, so making sure that everything is really positive and fun. So we do things like celebrate Museum Selfie Day every year. I give a brown bag lunch talk on the history of the selfie, all the way back to the original photo they think is the first selfie, and why museums do it, and why it's important to let that group of people that want to express themselves with selfies be a part of what we're sharing. And then we let staff have time to go take their own selfies by their favorite animals and throughout the aquarium. And then we celebrate Digital Learning Day, which happens every year in February. And usually I do some combination of a fun party with digital themed snacks. Snacks are always part of the fun. But this year we had like Mario Kart fruit snacks, apples for Apple, Chips Ahoy cookies for like computer chips. The punnier, the better. And then we played around with GIFs. And so I put some GIF apps on our iPads and just gave staff time to play around with GIFs. And they were charged with make a GIF that explained how you learned about using digital learning this year. And then we shared them with each other. And then when we go to introduce new tech, there's a couple of different things. So this is some snapshots of our PowerPoint when we first started talking about virtual reality a couple of years ago. It's making sure that everyone is part of the conversation. So when you go to a team of 30 or 100 or whatever team you're hoping to introduce this to, not everyone's going to have the same language. So if you start from the most basic place, then everyone feels like they can be at the table. So we started with like, what is the definition of VR? What is the definition of AR? What is a 360 video? How are these being used? What is some of the research behind them? What is the education field doing? In our case, what is the museum field doing? But also wanting to do it in a hands-on way and bringing in other staff. So we talked at them with a PowerPoint for a little while, but then we also had 6 different stations set up where they could go experience this. So we had cardboard or things set up on iPads that they could actually touch it and figure out what this was. And this was a couple years ago. So we've been doing things with 360 video and VR since then because people feel comfortable using those terms in our brainstorms and thinking about how they can bring them in. But then also, it's not just me. As I mentioned, I'm the only one with digital in my title, but all of the other people in this list happens to be a few of our different staff, either told me they were interested in this or they wanted to pilot it in their programs. So getting other members of your staff bought in to help you do the training, then it's a peer-to-peer training, not just me telling everyone, you guys should use this, it's really cool. And so we just had some different ways that we could use it, and then we always have a brainstorm of pie in the sky, if we were gonna use this, how would this be cool to use in our programming? Another one of the trainings that we do every year is we call it Bite-Sized Tech, and it's very much inspired by how we do the Ignite talks here at MCN. Any member of staff can submit like a little one-page proposal to me that just says what tool they want to share and why they want to share about it, and then they get 2 minutes, up to I think like 3 or 4 slides, to share what the tool is, how they've used it, why it's inspiring, and then again we have time for everyone to go and explore and in a hands-on way try these out, and they can include anything. So we have like an underwater camera that we call the fish phone that attaches to our underwater robots, and so it might be something super technical, but also somebody wanted to show off how to use our label maker, technically tech, or our sewing machines we have in our maker lab for our teens, and it kind of ranges. We got some new underwater iPad cases, we had a drone, so it could be anything, but all of those stations you see was a different staff member that really wanted to share that out, and then you have this fun hour where everyone's talking about different kinds of tech that they've either used in their personal life or in programming. And then this is just a screenshot of what some of our slides look like to see a variety of the tech that we shared during our Bite-Sized Tech presentation. So that's some of the ways we do like our trainings. And then one of the big overarching processes that we use is something called SAMAR. And I'm going to share a link, and I also tweeted it out on my Twitter. Heather and I wrote a paper for Museums in the Web last spring with a lot of detail about SAMAR if you're interested in this process in particular, but it's all wrapped into a part of how we do this empowerment model. This is not my image. It is cited at the bottom, but obviously I love it because working in an aquarium, it has all kinds of water. But it's how we got people to visualize, what you're already doing. In this case, this person is like looking out at the ocean and trying to figure out what's happening. But how can you imagine that tech could take you further? So something simple like a substitution might be something like a canoe. You can get out a little further. Augmentation, which adds some additional functionality, it's like a snorkel. Now you can look under the water. Modification, new tasks, that's something like scuba diving. And then an entire redefinition is like if we got you a deep sea submersible and the types of things that you could do. And it doesn't have to be an exact stepwise process. We think of it more like a continuum on how you might use these ideas to figure out how you could introduce technology into a program. And it just gives people a little bit of a framework for how they can think about bringing in tech. And so this whole process, I have an entire toolkit that involves a presentation on the SAMAR process to get them familiar with those terms. We have spreadsheets of examples of, like, let's say I wanted to SAMAR data collection or journaling or any number of buckets that tend to be in a lot of our programming. And then we have some initial questions to ask, like what are the goals of this program? What are the activities that happen in this program? What are you hoping the technology can help you achieve? And then also in the toolkit there's a Brainstorm template, so we have them list out like components of a program or specific activities that happen, and then we can take those one by one and think about how technology can add or enhance whatever you're doing. And we use this for our like educational programming, but you could really do this for anything. I actually ended up doing the Brainstorm with our evaluation department, which doesn't do a program, but they were able to think about ways they could use some tools differently and switch to doing some things on an iPad that they were doing on paper. So it really could work for any process. And then for each of these programs that we do, staff have to do a follow-up reflection survey as part of our evaluation, and we just added in some digital learning questions. They have to answer like what level of SAMAR they think they achieved, what tools they used, what was successful, what was challenging, and then I can review those so then I can support the next team that's brainstorming, thinking of things that worked and things that we need to keep tweaking. And so I want to give you a couple quick examples so you know what I'm talking about. So we have this program called High School Marine Biology, which we've actually been doing for over 40 years now, almost 45 years. And it was actually how I first saw the ocean, as I grew up in the Chicago area as well. And so I got to go on this trip where we take a bunch of high school kids snorkeling in the Bahamas, and they do research. It's really fun. But we had done paper journals for years, that whole time. And so that was one thing we thought, how could technology enhance this? And initially, it was just like a substitution. They typed on an iPad and like an Evernote app instead of writing. but it was an augmentation in the sense that then our evaluation team didn't have to try to transcribe teenagers' handwriting from journals. It was already typed up, so you could copy and paste it, you could save it, you could do word clouds to see what they were thinking and feeling about on these trips. And then the next year we added, within Evernote, you can add audio or photos or sketches like this one, and it started to add to this digital story they were able to capture of their trip. And so it's just a way for us to think about something we're already doing and how technology could enhance it. I don't know if anyone was at our panel yesterday, but another example, we have a program called Park Voyagers where museums take their museum out to the parks and out to areas of Chicago where the kids aren't always able to come to museums. And so we've done that in the past with things like crafts or hands-on activities, but we wanted to imagine how technology could support that even more. And actually this idea came from some of my staff after they were part of this virtual reality brainstorm. And so we captured 360 videos of the exhibits so the kids could experience the aquarium before they came to it and already get familiar and feel like they understood it before we brought them on the field trip so they could kind of get an idea for what that was like and lower that barrier. And then this past year, we also invested in an underwater 360 camera, so that took it even to the next level because now when they put on the VR headset, it's like they're snorkeling inside the exhibit, and that's been really fun to watch how excited they are about that. Another one is how we think about how we use social media. And so we tweet from all of our programs. They all have their own hashtag. One of the oldest is hashtag ShedROV, which is remotely operated vehicle underwater robotics. But instead of just sharing out about the program, over the years we've added scavenger hunts at the competition so that teams can be sharing pictures and images on Twitter about what they're doing with their robot. And then we added a training specifically for the teachers. We were already teaching them how to build robots, but we set aside a time during that training to teach them how to use Twitter so that more of them could get on Twitter and be a part of that community and share with each other in between the training and the robotics competition. And so thinking about the growth. So the first year that we did this, we piloted it with just 2 programs. And I got feedback from staff of what they liked and what they didn't like about the brainstorm process and how they were able to integrate technology. And from that, I got good feedback. Things like, we need to add something on the brainstorm sheet that says who specifically is going to be in charge of making sure that this happens, how are we going to follow up, who's going to research this new tool. And so we added some of those accountability factors to it. And now we do over 28 SAMR brainstorms a year. I should say I do. So I lead each of those and help them think through how we can incorporate technology in 28 and growing of our programs. And if you want to learn more, that's the link to the paper, but I also tweeted it out, or you can get it from me later as well. And so talking about social media, Shed Aquarium in general is on social media channels, but a few years ago we added our learning division to social media as well. And for a while, it was just me, and I was the only one doing anything on our social. And that's a little hard because if you're the only person, I couldn't be at every single one of those 28 plus programs that we do. And so it was figuring out how we bring more staff to contribute to these channels and help me figure out what content we want to do to share the story of what's happening in those programs. So I have a whole list of social media trainings that staff can go through. I have a Twitter 101, and again, this is about making sure that everyone is brought up and has the same language. And I just did a training with one of our departments because they are going to start sharing out more about our volunteers. And a lot of them have never been on Twitter, never used Twitter, didn't understand how Twitter was different than Pinterest. And so we needed to start at the very beginning and talk about, like, what is a tweet? What is a handle? What are the kinds of things we're sharing? And I actually have them, like, the PowerPoint that I show has a picture, and I cover up what the tweet was, and I make them, like, write a tweet in front of me, and we talk about what we include in that. And for some of you that manage social media, that seems like so basic, but by starting there, then everyone feels like they are on the team and they are part of it and that they don't feel like they're already lost. And so we start with a 101. If they want to learn more and learn about sharing more on Twitter, I have a 201. I have a Twitter for professional development that I do a couple times a year to talk about why I'm on Twitter professionally and why I love to have that space to talk to my colleagues. And then a training specifically to tweet for our handle, Shed Learning, so they understand our brand, our voice. Because we have a lot of kids in our programs, there's a lot of things with how we take pictures, photo releases, all of those kinds of things that we go over. And then in the last year, we've also added Periscope Training. There's only a couple of us because that's kind of going live. It takes a little bit more, have to be a little more comfortable. but a handful of our staff go live from some of our programs now. And then we share a Pinterest account with the main channel, but a lot of us are trained so that anytime we see a great resource that we want to share with teachers, parents, and caregivers, we can all just add that to Pinterest, and it's a richer community. Okay. I also like to say guidelines are empowering. It seems like guidelines would be restrictive because you're telling them what not to do, but for our staff, it's really empowering to have those guidelines because then they know as long as I'm within this, I can tweet this. When they live tweeted from the Bahamas for the first time last year. We got everything set up with a phone that had a Bahamas SIM card, and it was funny because some of those learning specialists hadn't tweeted as much, and they had a different voice than I did, but it was still within brand, it was within guidelines, but their tweets were like full of emojis, and I loved it. It was so fun to see them like share pictures of kids snorkeling and then have like all the fish emojis and things like that. But it was okay because it was within guidelines, and usually the guidelines just say things like, don't use a hashtag until you've searched it. Make sure, don't make up shed hashtags. We already have our official shed hashtags that you need to use if you want to use a hashtag. Double check the photo that everything looks fine and understandable. And then we also have something called program social media plans. Each one of those 28, 30 programs I mentioned has a social media plan that details what are the goals, why are we on social media, what tools are we using, what is an example of a tweet or something we're gonna share, and then who's responsible, who's gonna write the plan, who's gonna get trained, who is gonna be sharing, and how many times are we sharing from that program. And that way, when I have these like 20 people that are all on Twitter at the same time, I know which days, which programs are being shared, how many tweets they're aiming for, and I'm the one who's then managing and keeping track of it all, but I already have that handled with these social media plans, and I have it all organized so we know when we're sharing. Okay. Positive reinforcement. So another thing that I do for the staff that want to be on Twitter for professional development, and that's something I encourage, like it's a way that we can share our voice and get our voice out there and share ideas with each other, is I do about a quarterly unofficial Twitter awards. And so I make up like really silly awards, like best use of a new hashtag or most new followers or I don't know, best picture. And it just reminds them of like some of the fun ways that we're sharing on Twitter and why they might want to be in that space. So staff growth. So probably one of the reasons you're here is because you're wondering, what about my staff that are reluctant, or what about my staff that are not as excited as me about technology? I don't know if I have staff yet who are as excited about Twitter as me, but there's a few that are close. And I do have staff that come to me now of like, look what I found on Twitter. I have this new hashtag, and it's things I haven't even found. And I think that's the best feeling as a manager of digital learning, that people are starting to find digital tools and new hashtags that I haven't even found yet. Or things like, hey, I started watching our new 360 video and I have ideas for how we're going to use this in programming, and coming to me with new ideas. And those program social media plans I mentioned, it started off with me writing all of them, and now I have staff who just write them and send them to me, and I just look them over or add any feedback or ideas, and then they're ready to go. And it's really been amazing to see staff grow over the last 5 years of how much they're helping me do so that I can do more, and we can do so much more with piloting and with adding digital learning to our programs, and coming to me with new ideas for technology. And even the staff who were hesitant about technology, I have one staff member, and I love her, but she doesn't even have a TV at home, and she is not on any social media channels. And so in the beginning, I think she was hesitant just like from lack of knowing about that. But now she'll come to me and be like, oh, we need to tweet this, or we need to add this. And that's such a great feeling for people to come to understand the value and how we're sharing out what we're doing as a learning division, and the value of adding these new experiences and deeper engagements for our learners. So a few additional tips: if you're going to make things like trainings in PowerPoint or Prezi or documents, make sure they're saved in a safe space. For me, because I work across 3 different departments, I can't save things just on my department's H drive. It all has to be in a saved space. So just a note that might save you some time. Make trainings part of the staff onboarding. So every staff member that joins the learning division, I get 2 hours with them, and they get to learn about digital learning and what we've done and the SAMR process and social media, so that everyone's up to speed. So the first time they have to do that for a program, they know what we're doing. And bringing staff into that creation and modification. So it's really important for me that when I'm piloting things like a new template for a social media plan, or when we were trying the SAMR process for the first time, that I got staff feedback for what works and what doesn't work for them, because in the end, I'm trying to help them add to their programs and help them use technology in a way that supports their learning goals. Encouragement, I'm always about finding ways to be positive and making this fun and interesting and giving them hands-on, fun ways to try out technology. I think the fact that they all got to play around with VR headsets and our 360 cameras, it led to the fact that we've used it in so many of our programs because it wasn't intimidating anymore. It was something fun that they got to try. And then just celebrating. If you want to know more about Digital Learning Day, Museum Selfie Day, I can give you all my fun tech calendar days. But adding that into the celebration. And so I wanted to leave like 5-10 minutes at the end so that I had plenty of time to answer any questions. This is my email and my Twitter handle again, and then our learning Twitter handle. But I would love to take any of your questions about how to integrate this or specific things about empowering your team for digital learning. Yeah.
I just have one question about empowering so many to have a voice on Twitter.
Yeah.
The guidelines, I mean, I don't know if you have an in-house counsel.
Yeah.
But was there any concerns expressed from that perspective?
Yeah. So I have to repeat the question. So she wanted to know about having so many voices on social media and if there's in-house counsel. I feel like in a way, being learning, we get away with a little more because our Twitter channel doesn't have as many followers as our main channel. That's probably part of it, is we're allowed to try some new things and pilot some things. I have some policies in place, like we change the password every so often. So if you have staff turnover or anything happens, like there is a new password. I have staff go through the training, and so that they're comfortable, they can practice tweeting with someone else before they take it on by themselves. And it's like clearly laid out of what we do and don't share. I also oversee it, so I know what they tweet. I could always go in and delete it if I had to, but I've never had to do that. I think it goes back to, hopefully, you've hired the kind of people who are trustworthy and awesome, and they're going to tweet great things. In terms of, I think also, why I'm able to do it and say maybe the main channel only has like 2 or 3 people on their social is just because we are learning. And so we made the case that we wanted to be able to share from every single one of our learning programs. And myself, I can't. And I tried in the beginning to just be our only one on Twitter, but I would have had to work every Saturday, every evening. We just do so many programs that it wasn't possible. So this was like the best way for us to be able to share that story. And I don't know how it would work or who else you would want to add, but for me, by having like these guidelines, things laid out, I haven't had any problems. And I think there's over 20 people now that have the password that are all sharing from their programs. So does that answer your question? Maybe? Okay. Yeah.
When you experienced winning over
Yeah.
who were originally reluctant, was there a particular thing or pattern that sort of that experience was in common? That's something that you
Yeah.
best ways to win over reluctant?
I think the best thing is like the slow and steady. Is what I've seen is when we first started, I should give a little background. Digital learning at Shedd Aquarium started in 2012. And I started as the digital learning specialist. And originally, I just had a couple of programs that I did, and I did them, and they were our digital programs. And we quickly learned that that wasn't going to have the same bandwidth as me supporting everyone incorporating technology and making it more just ingrained in what we do. And then the next thing was like, okay, now I'm going to partner with this group and I'm going to pilot test with this group. And I think by moving slow and steady, that's one thing that helped. I also think that making things so positive and being receptive to feedback helps. So there have been times where they've told me this just doesn't work. So a good example would be I bought these underwater iPad cases, and I was super excited because I was like, oh, they can take them snorkeling with our camp groups or when they go to the Bahamas. But they're really heavy, and normally they work with a scuba tank, and so we had to buy like little air tanks to put on the end, like almost like you would use in those beverage things that like add the CO2 bubbles to your beverage. So you'd plug those on the end, but you can't travel with those on planes. So we had to like get them shipped to the boat, so they were waiting there, and so there became like a lot of logistical issues where it just wasn't. The cost benefit of that wasn't great, and they gave me that feedback, and I was like, okay, that's fine. You don't have to take them. We can use them for something else or use this. And I think asking for feedback and having that evaluation really helps, because then they feel like no one feels trapped in having to use a specific type of technology that I told them they had to use. They're the ones helping me do the brainstorm. I'm helping them think of the ideas, and so I think that helps with the ownership as well. I've never gone to a program and said, you have to use this technology or you have to do this app. they said to me like, oh, here are the things we're doing. We are going to go go birding, for example. Well, now we use the Merlin Bird app because it's really easy to use even for kids, and it makes the birding experience even better because kids are like actually recognizing species of birds when they're done, and it enhances the program. If they told me when we were done, like, it was cumbersome for the kids to carry the iPads around or anything like that, then we just would try something else. And so I think that's part of it too, is letting them know how much ownership that they have, because then people don't feel like weighed down by the technology, if that makes sense. Yeah. Anyone else? It's like, I can do the teacher pause where I just wait. Yeah.
So you talked a little about how you are sort of trickling down to other departments where a lot of this excitingly seems like you're kind of getting to lead what is happening.
Yeah.
A little bit about just sort of like your organizational structure.
Sure.
What other, it sounds great, like people trust you and you're able to implement things.
Yeah.
Having to work across departments and maybe kind of co-creating.
Yeah.
And working together, like kind of that.
Yeah. So I think there's definitely pros and cons. So she had a question about how we co-create across other departments, because I've talked a lot about how we work within learning. And that's a great question. I think that's an area where we're still growing. One thing that we just started recently, we had some turnover, and we have a new director of IT. And so I went and met with him when he started, and I said, hey, here's how we worked with IT in the past. I'd like for us to work more. I'd like for us to think about how we can be sharing even more. Because he mentioned, he's like, I didn't know you guys were already piloting with this. And because I have this little bucket of digital learning, I am able to pilot and push more than some other areas. And sometimes that's really beneficial. So like our social media and our videographer team, the camera that I bought, the 360 underwater camera, so we could pilot in learning, they really love it. And so they asked to come borrow it. I'm like, sure, as long as you share the assets with us. And so that's how we got like underwater 360 videos in exhibits, which might have been harder for me to do just me, but because the main channel wanted them to share on our main Facebook and just to have for our media assets, then that opens that relationship. And I'm like, yes, please borrow our technology. That's great. But then we have this relationship where then I can have the assets that they make and use them in our programs. I think sometimes one of the challenges of working at a big institution is sometimes you have to bring in like 10 different departments to get something done. So we're working on doing a Google expedition. And learning, like the digital learning team, we really wanted to do that. And so we had to take ownership of that. But in order for us to go take 360 photos all over the building, including behind the scenes, we've had to coordinate across 10 departments. And so sometimes that is a challenge because I have to get permission from fishes and marine mammals and PR and media and a lot of different departments. And so those become more complicated projects. I think, though, what's nice is because we've been able to pilot things within learning and within my sphere of control, then we can say, but look how great this turned out, or look at this pilot we were able to do, and then it gets other departments excited enough to help us do something bigger. I don't know if that's possible at all organizations, but I have a really good relationship. Somebody else, when we were asking about social media, also a couple years ago, my social media channel didn't have regular meetings with the other social media channels, and so I initiated that too. I reached out to the other people at my institution that monitor those, and I was like, hey, we should have a monthly meeting. And we now have a new person who's managing those channels, and so he's super excited, and he's taken over those meetings, and they're super productive. But sometimes it just takes me reaching out to and saying, hey, I would love for us to have a touch base, and then being able to grow from there of here's the things we want to pilot, here's what we want to do, and just see how other people, if you can get them excited to bring it along. Another thing we did do, in addition to like getting learning excited about VR and 360 video, is we invited like all our VPs and our high-level people to come and have like a learn about VR session. And so I put VR headsets on all of them and kind of got them excited about it too. So that's another thing, is like if you have something you want to do, is letting people play around with it, I found to be helpful. But, it just kind of depends on what you're trying to pursue. Yeah. Anything else? Okay. Well, if anyone has any other questions, I'll stick around. I have my card up here. I'm happy to grab that link for you or anything else. But thank you all so much for coming. Yeah.